Our guest on Personally Speaking this week is the legendary Catholic news editor, Ed Wilkinson. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and Ed Wilkinson joins me now. Ed recently debuted his new book called Chasing Church News, a 50-year look back at the history of the Diocese of Brooklyn, which features photographs and reflections by the Tablet editor. Ed was the editor of the Tablet, the Brooklyn Diocesan newspaper, from 1985 until 2018, when he assumed the title of editor emeritus. The book, Ed says, contains some of his favorite photographs as well as historically significant photos that he took throughout his career. Ed can be seen on Currents, the daily Catholic news show on NET TV, and he hosts the weekly NET TV show On the Block, an interview show that features the priests of the metropolitan area in their home neighborhoods. Ed is a lifelong resident of Brooklyn. He attended Cathedral Prep, Cathedral College in Douglaston, and studied theology at Immaculate Conception Seminary. Ed and his wife Sheila and their son Edward Daniel live in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. He's here with us today to talk about his life, his career, his Catholic journalism, and the Catholic faith and values that sustain him, and his new book called Chasing Church News. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Ed Wilkinson. All right, we're here with Ed Wilkinson. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things, among them Chasing Church News, his wonderful new book. But before we get into that, Ed, when a guy is a Catholic, active in his church, faithful guy, as you have been for many years, I have to wonder about the family of origin. So one thing I've never known about you, the people who raised you, your parents, what did they do right? And how did you get introduced to the faith?
Oh, gee, the faith has always been an integral part of my life. I mean, I was raised in a very Catholic home in Brooklyn, in Greenpoint. And, we were very tight. We were big parishioners at St. Alphonsus Church in Greenpoint. Okay. And my parents just always took us to Mass on Sunday. We went to Catholic schools. We were raised in the faith. So to me, it's just been part of my DNA. I'm a Catholic, and it's part of who I am.
Now, Ed, what do the parents think when, at least for a while, you did time, a significant while, you did time in the seminary? Were they for it, against it? How did they react to that?
Well, they thought that was going to be a great idea, that, I was the only son. I have three sisters. And they said, oh, great, he's going to be a priest. Because I had been an altar server and all of that. Very close to the church, very active. Went to Cathedral Prep, the high school seminary, and the college. And then I actually did 1 year of study at the major seminary in Huntington. And at that point, I just decided that I wanted to go in another direction. And there was a little bit of heartbreak in the family, I have to say. They were a bit disappointed, but eventually we worked it all out.
Oh, that's great, though. So a lot of what you are is very much the things that they did and shaped that they've, and the priests that you met along the way, which obviously was a good experience for you. When we hear these, some of the horror stories, I look back on just about every priest I ever knew growing up, and they were inspiring for me. So now, for those who don't know, Ed Wilkinson, aside from writing this book, is this kind of legend in Catholic journalism. He's been doing it forever, basically since he left the seminary, essentially. But I ask you that because I got to ask you, what's happening to Catholic journalism? I'll give you an example, Ed. When I worked at the Christophers as their director, the column would go out to 300 newspapers around the country. There's no way there's 300 newspapers right now that are still publishing Catholic stuff. And you at the Tablet, you guys are the last man standing, as it were, with Catholic New York on now, Long Island Catholic on. What's happened to Catholic journalism? Why is there so little left? And how in the world does the Tablet keep on keeping on?
Well, you're right. You see dioceses choose to close their newspapers and to go in new directions and to take on social media and all these other platforms. But I think they're being very short-sighted, because I think there's still a place for newspaper, for print journalism. it's been such a part of who we are as a Catholic Church, and it's such a great way to evangelize. And there are still people who want to read newspapers. There are especially the people who are in our pews, the older people.
Right.
They're comfortable sitting reading a newspaper. They don't want to go online and read their news. So I think a lot of dioceses have been very short-sighted when they cut their diocesan newspapers. And like you say, the Tablet is the last one standing in New York City. Which really surprises. I mean, it doesn't surprise us that we're still here, because the Tablet has really been built on a solid foundation. It's over 100 years old. We were founded in 1908, and it's always been noted for serious Catholic journalism. And we take on the issues. We talk about all of the issues. We're faithful to the Church and to the Holy Father. And thank God we're still standing, because there's a real commitment in our diocese still to all of the aspects of media, print, and also social media and television. We try to stay involved in all of it. And we've wrapped all of our communications efforts into one entity called the Sales Media. And through that, we help each other. TV feeds off the print feeds off the social media. And we kind of work all together in conjunction as one big media platform. And I think there's always going to be a place for print journalism. And like I say, I wish some dioceses would take a second look at what they're doing. Even we saw Catholic News Service, which is the U.S. bishops. It was a valuable news service, very, very valuable to all of our papers in the country. And we saw them fold because of decisions that had to be made and priorities. Financial, it's usually financial problems. And but I think it's short-sighted. We should make a commitment to print journalism. And I'm just glad that the Tablet is still there to try to lead the way.
No, a Tablet still always was and still is a great source of information. And the alternative, Ed, unfortunately, is that there's still going to be secular newspapers out there that are not always kind to the Church. And it's another voice when we have Catholic press that matters. And now, can you explain to us this overarching organization called the Sales Media? How did they come to pick the name of St. Francis de Sales to organize themselves?
Well, St. Francis de Sales is the patron of Catholic journalists. He was a great archbishop, and he communicated a lot in letters. He was a writer himself. And so he's always been the patron saint of Catholic writers and Catholic journalists. So back in, I guess it was about 2012, Bishop DiMarzio had this idea of taking all of the different communications efforts in our diocese and folding it into one corporation. And I think he had a lot of foresight in doing that. And he put Monsignor Kieran Harrington at the time in charge of that. And he said, let's, instead of having a tablet corporation over here and a prayer channel over here, let's put everybody together, work together, feed off each other, and then strengthen us up as a foundation. And I think it's worked very well. We all work together, all different aspects of the media. And, we help each other with stories. We give story. We trade contacts with each other. It's really been a great cooperative effort. And I think it should be a model that other people should follow. It takes a real commitment, though. It takes a financial commitment. And Bishop DiMarzio was willing to make that at the time. And I think it's paid off. The efforts have paid off.
Ed Wilkinson's our guest, the editor emeritus of the Brooklyn Tablet. One of the things about you, Ed, because you have dealt with being a journalist and an editor for so many years, is that you've seen people who will lead our church come and go. And I'm intrigued because even just the past 30 years, you have someone like John Paul and someone like Benedict and someone like Francis. My point is that the church ideologically kind of swings sometimes. There's people conservative, people less conservative, people are called progressive. And I'm just wondering, when you were trying to put out a product for the Catholic Church, but the leaders of the church seem to be going in one direction or another, what do you do? Like, do you stay anchored in one particular point of view, or do you have to move with the wind to kind of change direction because the leadership has changed?
Well, the Tablet for many, many years was a very, very conservative traditional newspaper under Patrick Scanlon, who was a real giant in the Catholic journalism. And then in the late 60s, editor Don Zirkel, who recently passed away, he took over the reins, and he moved the paper in the direction of the Second Vatican Council. And it became more open and more liberal. and a lot of people, some people got confused by it. They couldn't understand all the changes. So when I took over the paper in 1985, one of the things was that I tried to shift the paper more into the center. And I wanted the newspaper to be a place where no matter where you were as a Catholic, you could still pick up the tablet each week and see yourself reflected in it in some way. And that was a challenge, no doubt about it. It was a challenge. And sometimes you alienated people on either side. But the thing was to try to stay where the people are at, let the people in the pews have a place that they could say what they want to say and keep them informed, but always remaining faithful to what the core message of the church is. So sometimes it's a difficult balancing act, and politically it can be tough at times. You have to chart a very wise course, but it works for us, and I think that's probably where the tablet still is. Where the main thing is to remain faithful to the church, to remain faithful to the teaching, to the Holy Father, and then to make the paper an open forum where people can have their say about how they feel about the church and what they think about the movements and where things are going, and always reflect where the church is, not to try to impose a certain ideology on anybody, but allow the paper to reflect where the church is at in those times.
Okay, now actually that's a perfect segue. Ed Wilkinson's our guest. A good old friend of yours, Monsignor Frank Maniscalco, who was editor of the Long Island Catholic, used to
wonderful guy, yeah,
wonderful guy, talented guy, head of media relations for the bishops for a while, but he used to put into the Long Island Catholic, or allow in, letters sometimes that were strongly in disagreement with something the church stood for or the way something was presented in the newspaper, because he believed that the paper should be open to, as you say, many expressions of how people come at the church. But I know he got grief from people saying it should just say what the church says, and anyone who doesn't agree with us, you shouldn't publish their stuff. How did you handle the balancing act of, for instance, even letters to the editor, when people are taking you or anybody else to task, you still put them in there sometimes?
Absolutely. We tried to give everybody their say. And I remember doing a TV show out at Telecare with Monsignor Maniscalco, and Bishop McGovern was on at the time, and he was the publisher of the Long Island Catholic. And he was really a great open publisher. He was open to those ideas, and he agreed with Monsignor Frank that you have to allow the paper to reflect the thinking of Catholics and people where they're at. Give them their say, and then everybody should be able to find a place for themselves in the newspaper. So you do take grief. And sometimes I got called on the carpet, no doubt about it. And, I made a beeline down to the chancery and had to sit down and talk with certain officials in the diocese. But it's a balancing act. You don't want to go too far, but you want to give people their say, and let the paper reflect what the thinking of the people in the pews are.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Ed Wilkinson's book, Chasing Church News, also reintroduced me to someone that Bishop McGovern, obviously, I loved. He was a man very active in my life, but I also loved and admired. And it's interesting, I don't think young people know even who he was. You celebrate a number of times here, Bishop Francis McGovern. Can you tell our listeners and viewers something about this incredible Bishop of Brooklyn?
Bishop McGovern was, he was a mensch, they say. He was just an extraordinary human being. So he was a very affable man. He was a real man of the church, but he was open to new ideas, and he was willing to allow the church to move and to allow some of these new ideas to take hold in the church and to have an expression. And he really allowed the Catholic press to flourish. He gave me my job back in 1985 when Don Zirkel retired and moved on to other fields. I got the job. There was some movement at that time, or some feeling that there should be a priest editor. They wanted some people wanted the bishop to sit on the Catholic press a little bit more, but he was open to keeping a layman in place, and he appointed me. And he called me down and he said, this is what you have. He said, watch out when you write those headlines. He said, sometimes those headlines can get you into trouble. Then he said, if you can, try to keep me out of trouble. And I said, okay, Bishop. I said, I'll try to do that.
I'll do my best, right?
That's the kind of guy he was. He was a real human being, and he knew everybody by name. Yeah. I remember as a young reporter walking along, and he called me when they said, Ed. And I said, oh, my God, the bishop knows my name, That's the kind of guy Bishop McGovern was. He knew everybody in the diocese.
Yeah.
He took a personal interest in you, as that's what you felt like. You felt like he took a personal interest in you and how you were doing. He would always ask, "How are you?" And he was always very cooperative. I remember you'd be taking a picture, and he'd be blessing a little child, maybe, and he'd hold that pose. And then he looked. He said, "Do you have it?" I said, "Yeah, I got it."
Isn't that great? Now, everyone walks a fine line. I wondered how you guys handled this back in the time. One of the members of your diocese was, of course, Governor Mario Cuomo, who was wrong on the issue of life. But there's, on the one hand, Cardinal O'Connor, who I loved and admired too, but he was having none of it in terms of Mario Cuomo. And yet your bishop seemed to be, McGovern, both friendly to Cuomo, but at the same time upholding church teaching. What was the gift of personality he had to respectfully disagree, but not be disagreeable, even with people like Mario Cuomo?
Yeah, well, that was the real balancing act, and as you say, gift. It was a gift that Bishop McGovern had. He strongly disagreed with Mario Cuomo on abortion, of course, and the bishop never wavered on his position on abortion, and the governor was just flat out wrong. But in order to maintain a dialogue, Bishop McGovern was always friendly to. I was present a couple of times when the two of them would get together. And Mario Cuomo would always show respect. He kissed the bishop's ring to show that he was he knew that the bishop was the church authority, but he was wrong on that issue. But Bishop McGovern never confronted him, say publicly. He spoke to him, I'm sure, in private a number of times. But the bishop took a political. The governor took a political issue which was wrong, and we were made no doubt about it. We always said that. We expressed that he was a native son of the Brooklyn Diocese and a Catholic. He was a faithful Catholic. He was just wrong on that issue. And
right.
But Bishop McGovern, as you say, he had a gift for being able to disagree with somebody, but still maintain a congenial, open dialogue with them. And he had Mario's ear. The two of them. They could talk, and I'm sure they talked, and
they were paisans, they were good.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the other guys, one of the other sons of Brooklyn, of course, before Mario Cuomo, was Governor Hugh Carey, and we had him on the program a few times. But I mention it because it goes to your point about Bishop McGovern quietly, gently, probably challenging Mario, because Governor Carey would say, I was called in quietly, privately by Cardinal Cook. He told me I was wrong on a bunch of stuff, but he didn't hold a press conference. He just did it quietly and gently, and he was concerned for my soul. And because he did it, respecting me and giving me the right to privacy to talk one-on-one, he said, I took seriously what he said, and I did change my direction, and I became pro-life, and I got my marriage in order. He said, but had he gone publicly against me or embarrassed me in public, I probably would have gotten my back up. But there may be something to that about Bishop McGovern and Cardinal Cook,
maybe that's why people consider Cardinal Cook to be a saint. He was able to transcend those issues and still maintain a healthy dialogue with people. And Governor Carey was, another good Catholic who eventually came around again, as you say, and reconciled his thinking with the church. So. I wish Governor Cuomo had done the same thing, but unfortunately, it wasn't in the works.
What I asked the question of Governor Carey, why did you change direction? And he said, because I'm getting older, I'm going to die, and I know I'm responsible for God, and I don't want to go and have him say to me, "You knew the truth, but you didn't speak the truth." So let me speak the truth now.
That was a wise man.
Those who don't know about Chasing Church News, there are parts of this book where Ed Wilkinson talks about the fact that a story like 9/11 takes them through the night till they get the issue to bed of the tablet. I mention that, Ed, because people might not know, but this is not bachelor Ed Wilkinson. This is married man Ed Wilkinson.
That's right.
So at home is Sheila. I'm just wondering, how do you put in the hours you have to put in to have the life of the tablet, be an editor in Catholic journalism, and at the same time be present to your wife and family?
Well, there's no doubt about it. Your spouse has to be very understanding. And, when my wife and I met, I already had been the editor of the tablet. So she kind of knew what she was getting into, but she's always was very good about that. I mean, there were weekends that I had to be out. There were evenings during the week I had to be out because
Yeah.
that's just the nature of the beast. You have to be out, covering things. And she was always very understandable. And I got to say, she was an attorney herself. So sometimes
Hmm.
she worked late hours, and I had to be understanding about her hours
Right,
also.
right, right.
So it
No,
just worked with us. You've got to be able to respect each other's territory and allow people to be themselves. And we've been married 33 years now, and it's been very, very good. We've understood each other, and we've been able to support each other, in what we do. So she's always very understanding of the time that even now, even though I'm retired, sometimes she'll look at me and she'll say, "Aren't you retired? You really have to go to this or that."
because you're
but
so busy all the time.
but
Yeah,
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 but
yeah.
she understands, and that's a great gift to have.
Now, Ed, I'm going to presume that unlike half the couples that I marry now, you guys didn't meet online. How did you meet each other?
Well, we actually met on stage. Uh, my
Oh,
wife is a very talented person, and she was singing the lead role with the Diocesan Theater Guild in The Sound of Music. She was playing Maria, and I had brought a couple of my nephews, and they were performing in the same show, and I was working on the stage crew. And Monsignor Joe Fanaro, who was the
hmm.
head of the Theater Guild at the time, he said to me, "I've got a girl you've got to meet." And I said, "Just leave me alone, Monsignor. I'm very happy, doing what I do." But he was persistent, thank God, and he kept throwing us together, and it eventually it just clicked. And but she was on stage there, and she performed in Sound of Music and also Showboat, had the lead
Okay.
roles, a beautiful voice, and how can I not be enthralled?
So you married Maria von Trapp, huh?
I did. People always say I'm up.
Now, I want to ask you, Ed, this is a deeply personal question, but I love the book. But what I got a kick out of in the book, and for our watchers and listeners, there's a picture of young Ed Wilkinson many years ago. So it leads me to my question, Ed, that for all of us, if we're lucky enough to still be alive, we're aging all the time. What's your perspective on aging? Does it bother you or not at all?
It's just a number.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel any different than I did 20 or 30 years ago. I sometimes I have to watch myself. I have to remind myself that I'm not 30 or 40 years old anymore, and I do have to take it a little easier. But I still have that same enthusiasm for. When I see a story breaking, I want to run to the office.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it happened recently when Pope Benedict passed away. My first
Hmm.
instinct was to get in the car and go to the office, and I said, "Wait, I don't have to do that anymore."
Right, right.
But as long as you have the enthusiasm for something that you do, I mean, I loved what I did for a living, and I got paid to do
Hmm.
something that I loved so much, and it wasn't really work to me. It was
Yeah,
really part of who I was. So I just loved it, and when you have that kind of enthusiasm, for what you do, age doesn't really mean anything.
yeah.
It's just a number, as people say, and I really do feel that. I'm going to be 75 next month, and
Okay.
I to me, I used to think 75 was old.
Yeah,
But
yeah. You know,
it
you
doesn't
and you
seem
you
like
you
that
touch on
anymore.
that. You say that
Yeah,
in your book. I love that when Ed Wilkinson got the call from the editor saying we got a job for you here at the Tablet, he
that's
started
right.
working. He started working without even knowing what they were paying him, if they were paying him, but he just loved the
That's right.
call to do that work. Now, I got to ask you, as a faithful Catholic guy who's worked with and in the church for a long time, I often wonder when people are professionally working in the church how they give perspective to the times when the church heartbreakingly disappoints. And I got to ask you, how in the world did you process the years of embarrassment and shame of the scandals?
Hmm. It's still very painful.
Yeah.
As I said before, I was in the seminary, so
Hmm.
I know a lot of these guys personally who wound up having problems and were
Yeah.
dismissed from active ministry. To me, I was very surprised at the time, and
Yeah.
and I've said to people, I say, when you go to work for the church, you don't go there to find your faith. You better have a strong faith when you get
Mm.
involved, because if you don't have a strong faith, you're not going to survive. Because you see
Yeah.
behind the scenes, and sometimes it's not pretty, but you just have to hold on to your faith, believe what you believe, and and see that there's a way through this. God has a plan somehow through all this. But it was very disappointing and very hurtful
Sure.
still when you see some things. I said the other day to somebody, I said, "Do you think we're ever going to get through this? Are we ever going to get over this?" But
Yeah.
you've got to maintain your own faith.
Ed, final question. Chasing Church News, why did you write it, and how do people who listen to or watch a show like this get hold of this beautiful book?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wrote it because people kept saying to me, "Boy, 50 years in the Catholic press, you should write a book."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I've been collecting these photos for 50 years because the photography part of the profession was really one of my passions. And I felt I had a good collection of photos. And I said, I think I can tell the story of the past 50 years of who the church was during this time through photos. And I just collected all the photos. It took a lot of time to do it, believe me, going back and finding these files and going through them and putting the pictures together. So I put it together because I wanted to give a snapshot of the Catholic Church in Brooklyn and Queens over the past 50 years, and to give people a sense of their Catholic identity. This is who we are as Catholics, and this is what we did in the last 50 years.
Right.
And so that's why I did it. I'm doing a series of book signings right now. I'm visiting parishes around the diocese on Sunday mornings. People can buy the book there, or they could go to the Tablet website and they can order the book online. Okay. So I was in Our Lady of Angels in Bay Ridge yesterday, and we sold 25 copies of the book.
Good.
I signed every one. It was a labor of love.
I want to thank Ed Wilkinson for being with us and Personally Speaking. He is a great Catholic layman who has given so much to the church. And what we were talking before about Bishop McGovern and about Bishop McGann, you are the same kind of guy. Ed, you're welcoming to people. And even if you disagree with their point of view, you're never a disagreeable guy. And you seem to respect everybody, whether they agree with you or not. And you're just a wonderful human being and a great Catholic representation of the church in so many ways. So I encourage our listeners and readers to get Chasing Church News, and maybe Ed will come right to your home to sign it. But please think about that. Ed, it's been years since I've seen Sheila, but please give her my best. You are
I certainly will,
a wonderful man.
Great to talk to you. Great to see you.
As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you need to contact me, you can reach me at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. Any shows you want to see or watch, you go to YouTube and search under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. Watch the shows and please hit like and subscribe. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're also now on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.